The council chamber floated in the darkness of space like a jewel carved from starlight. It orbited Centris Prime, the ancient capital world where 12 species had gathered for 50,000 years to rule the galaxy. Inside the massive structure, holographic displays flickered with the light of 1 trillion stars, each one representing worlds that bowed to the council's will. Ambassador Chen Wei stood alone in the center of the chamber. The polished floor beneath his feet was made from compressed diamond, so clear he could see the planet rotating far below. Around him, rising in a perfect circle, sat the representatives of the 12 elder races, each one perched on platforms that hung in the air, looking down at the lone human with expressions ranging from boredom to barely concealed contempt. Chen had been speaking for 20 minutes. His voice echoed in the vast space, but he knew his words were falling on deaf ears. He had come to plead for recognition of Earth's colonies, for the sovereignty that every spacefaring species deserved. Instead, he felt like a child being lectured by impatient parents. Chancellor Vormakis of the Zetharians sat at the highest point in the chamber. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, and it showed in his thick muscular frame and the ridge of bone that crowned his elongated skull. His eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangle on his face, fixed on Chen with something that might have been amusement. "Ambassador Chen," Vormakis said, his voice booming through translation software that made it sound like grinding stones. "We have heard your petition. The council has deliberated. We find it premature." Chen's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Premature? Humanity has maintained peaceful colonies on 17 worlds for the past 40 years. We have harmed no one. We have respected the boundaries established by this council. We only ask for the same rights granted to every other species in the galaxy." A rippling sound came from one of the other platforms. It was Ambassador Thex, a Krell whose species communicated through water flowing over specially evolved organs in their translucent bodies. The translation came through a moment later. "You have been in space for only 200 years, human. The youngest race in this chamber has traveled the stars for 8,000 years. You are infants playing with technology you barely understand." "We understand it well enough," Chen said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "We built it ourselves. We didn't need anyone's help to reach the stars." "Yes," said Representative Shal of the Vosh, her methane-filled containment suit hissing softly. "You built it by studying the wreckage of our vessels that crashed on your world centuries ago. Reverse engineering is not innovation, Ambassador. It is imitation." Chen felt heat rising in his chest, but he forced it down. Losing his temper would only prove their point. Whether we learned from others or discovered it ourselves doesn't change the fact that we are here. We are a spacefaring civilization. We deserve recognition. Deserve? Vormakis leaned forward, and the light caught the metallic implants that laced his skull. "You deserve what we grant you, human. Nothing more. Your species spreads across the galaxy like a virus, multiplying faster than any race we have encountered. 20 billion humans when we made first contact. Now 200 years later, you number 100 billion spread across dozens of worlds. This is not sustainable. This is not responsible. We colonize uninhabited worlds," Chen protested. "We take nothing from anyone." "You take space itself," said Councillor Rethkan, whose serpentine body coiled around his floating platform. "Every world you claim is a world unavailable to species who might need it in the future. The galaxy is vast, but it is not infinite. The Council has maintained peace and order for 50 millennia, because we understand restraint. Your species does not." Chen looked around the chamber, searching for a single sympathetic face. He found none. The representatives watched him with the patient condescension of adults watching a child throw a tantrum. They had already made their decision. This hearing was just a formality. "What would you have us do?" Chen asked quietly. Vormakis gestured, and a holographic document appeared in the center of the chamber, floating between Chen and the council members. The human ambassador stepped closer, reading the terms displayed in glowing text. "The Council has prepared a framework for humanity's integration into galactic society," Vormakis said. "You will halt all colonial expansion immediately. You will decommission your military fleet, retaining no more than 50 vessels for system defense. You will submit all technological development to Council oversight. You will pay an annual tribute of resources and materials to support Council operations, and you will accept Council governors on each of your worlds to ensure compliance with these terms." Chen stared at the document, his blood turning to ice. "These aren't terms of integration. This is subjugation. You're asking us to become a vassal state. We are offering you protection, Vormakis corrected. The galaxy is dangerous, Ambassador. Your species is young and aggressive. Without our guidance, you will make enemies you cannot defeat. We have seen it before. Species that expanded too quickly, that refused to listen to wisdom. They are all extinct now. We are trying to save you from yourselves. By taking away our freedom? Chen's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. By turning us into slaves? The chamber fell silent. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Several of the council members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked angry. Slaves? Vormakis's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You dare use that word here? We who have maintained peace across 10,000 star systems? We who have prevented wars that would have burned entire sectors of the galaxy? Ambassador Chen, you insult not just this council, but the memory of every being who has benefited from our stewardship. Chen met the Chancellor's three-eyed gaze without flinching. Then call it what it is, protection, guidance, oversight. Use whatever words make you comfortable. But don't pretend you're offering us anything but chains. Vormakis stood, his massive frame rising from his seat. The other council members watched in silence. This was the moment that would determine humanity's fate, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The council has voted, Vormakis said. The decision is unanimous. Humanity will accept these terms within 30 standard days or face the consequences of defiance. And what consequences are those? Chen asked, though he already knew the answer. Quarantine, Vormakis said simply. Your home system will be blockaded. Your colonies will be seized. Your ships will be impounded. You will be restricted to your birth world until such time as you demonstrate the maturity required for galactic citizenship. If you resist, we will consider it an act of war against the Council itself. Chen felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. An act of war against the Council meant facing the combined military might of 12 ancient civilizations. Humanity had 73 operational warships. The Council could field thousands without straining their resources. I need to consult with my government, Chen said. Of course, Vormakis replied, sitting back down. You have 30 days. We are not unreasonable, Ambassador. We simply require obedience. Return to Earth, speak with your leaders. Make them understand the reality of their situation. The Council's patience is vast, but it is not infinite. Chen bowed stiffly, a gesture of respect he no longer felt, and turned toward the exit. As he walked across the diamond floor, he could feel the eyes of the 12 elder races on his back. They saw him as a child, a primitive who needed to be taught his place. They saw humanity as a problem to be managed, a threat to be neutralized before it could grow strong enough to challenge their authority. They had no idea what was coming. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks through the established hyperspace lanes. Chen spent most of that time in his quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel, writing his report and preparing for the storm he knew would come. He had failed in his mission, but that failure might be exactly what humanity needed. When he finally stood before the United Earth Congress, the massive assembly chamber was packed with representatives from every nation and colony. The air hummed with tension as Chen delivered his report, explaining the Council's ultimatum in detail. He left nothing out, making sure they understood exactly what submission would mean. The debate that followed lasted for 6 days. Some argued for acceptance, pointing out the overwhelming military advantage the Council possessed. Others called for defiance, insisting that humanity hadn't fought its way to the stars only to surrender its freedom to alien overlords. The arguments grew heated, voices rising as fear and anger battled for dominance. On the 7th day, the vote was called. Chen watched from the gallery as the results appeared on the massive display screen. The measure to reject the Council's ultimatum passed by a margin of 62%. Earth would not submit, humanity would not bow. The chamber erupted in applause and shouting, hope and terror mixing in equal measure. Chen closed his eyes and took a deep breath. They had just declared war on an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. Historians would remember this day as either humanity's finest hour or its greatest mistake. 28 days later, the Council Armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system. 500 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons powered down but their shields raised. It was a show of force, a demonstration of the overwhelming power that backed the Council's authority. Admiral Keiko Tanaka watched their approach from the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Around her, The other 72 vessels of Earth's defense fleet held their positions, spread out across the system in a defensive formation that her tactical officers had been refining for weeks. "They're hailing us," her communications officer reported. "Put it through," Tanaka said. The view screen flickered and a face appeared. Admiral Thexeron of the Krell, his translucent body rippling with what might have been confidence or contempt. "Human vessels. This is Admiral Thexeron of the Galactic Council Fleet. You are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. This is your only warning." Tanaka stood from her command chair, smoothing her uniform. She had prepared for this moment, running through countless scenarios in her mind. Now that it was here, she felt strangely calm. "Admiral Thexeron," she said, her voice steady and clear. "This is Admiral Keiko Tanaka of the United Earth Space Command. The Sol system is sovereign human territory. Your fleet is in violation of our space. You have 1 hour to withdraw, or we will consider your presence an act of war." Thexeron's body rippled with what the translation software rendered as laughter. "Admiral Tanaka, you command 73 primitive vessels against 500 ships of the line. Some of my vessels have been in service longer than your species has had written language. Do not mistake courage for wisdom. Surrender now and we will be merciful." "No," Tanaka said simply. The word hung in the space between them. Thexeron's laughter stopped. "Then you have chosen extinction," the Krell Admiral said. "So be it." The transmission cut off. Tanaka sat back down, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "All ships," she said into the fleet-wide channel. "Battle stations. They wanted to fight. Let's give them one they'll never forget." The Council fleet moved with the precision of a machine that had been perfected over millennia. 500 warships, each one a masterpiece of advanced technology, glided through the Sol system in perfect formation. Their shields shimmered like soap bubbles in the light of the distant sun, and their weapons arrays tracked every human vessel with cold, calculated efficiency. Admiral Thexeron watched from his command ship, the Eternal Tide, as his fleet deployed according to the battle plan. It was a simple plan, really. Overwhelming force applied to inferior opponents. The humans would either surrender or be destroyed. Either outcome was acceptable to the Council. "Analysis of human vessels," he commanded, his water-filled body rippling with anticipation. A holographic display materialized before him, showing detailed scans of the human fleet. The tactical officer's translation came through a moment later. Their largest vessels are approximately 800 meters in length. Power output suggests fusion-based reactors, primitive but functional. Weapons appear to be a mix of kinetic railguns and missile systems. No energy weapons detected. Shields are present but significantly weaker than our own. Estimated combat effectiveness, negligible. Negligible, Thexeron repeated, savoring the word. This would not even qualify as a battle. It would be an execution, a lesson taught to other young species who might consider defying the Council's wisdom. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Tanaka studied the same tactical display showing the Council fleet's approach. Her XO, Commander Marcus Rodriguez, stood beside her, his face grim. "They're splitting into 3 groups," Rodriguez observed. "Primary force heading straight for Earth. Second group moving toward Mars, third targeting the orbital stations around Jupiter." "They want to hit everything at once," Tanaka said. "Show us we can't defend our own system. Break our will to fight." "Can we?" Tanaka glanced at him. "Can we what? Defend the system or break?" "Either." "Both." She looked back at the display, watching the red icons of the Council fleet spreading across the hologram like a disease. "We're about to find out." The civilian evacuation had begun days ago, but millions of people still remained on Earth and the other colonies. There simply wasn't enough time or enough ships to move everyone to safety. Tanaka had made the hardest decision of her career when she ordered the evacuation protocols. Military families first, then essential personnel, then a lottery for everyone else. Some people would be left behind when the shooting started. She would have to live with that. "All ships, this is Tanaka," she said over the fleet channel. "Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. Our families, our homes, our freedom. The Council thinks we're primitives, thinks we'll roll over and submit because they have more ships. They're wrong. Show them what humans can do when we're pushed into a corner. Tanaka out. The first shot was fired by a council destroyer that detected a human frigate in its path. The energy beam lanced across the void, striking the frigate's shields. The barrier held for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing, and the beam carved through the ship's hull like a knife through paper. The frigate broke apart, its atmosphere venting into space as escape pods scattered like seeds from a dying flower. "Weapons free," Tanaka shouted. "All ships, engage at will." The human fleet erupted into action. Railguns spat tungsten slugs at a significant fraction of the speed of light. Missiles streaked across the darkness, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward their targets. The Council fleet's defensive systems activated, shooting down most of the incoming fire. But some got through. A Council cruiser took 3 railgun hits in quick succession, its shields flickering before one slug punched through and tore a gash in its hull. But for every hit the humans scored, the Council answered with 10. Energy beams and plasma bolts filled the space around Earth, creating a deadly light show that could be seen from the surface. Human ships died quickly when the Council's guns found them. Their shields were simply too weak, their armor too thin. Within the first 30 minutes, humanity had lost 12 vessels, yet they kept fighting. When a human destroyer lost its engines, the crew aimed it at a Council battleship and rammed it at full speed. The collision destroyed both vessels in a ball of nuclear fire. When a frigate's weapons were knocked out, its captain ordered ramming speed and crashed into a Council carrier, detonating the ship's reactor on impact. Thexeron watched these suicide attacks with growing confusion. "They're throwing their lives away," he said, his body rippling with what might have been concern. "This is madness. Why don't they surrender?" His tactical officer had no answer. In 50,000 years of Council rule, no species had ever fought like this. Most civilizations understood the mathematics of war. When the numbers were against you, you surrendered and hoped for mercy. These humans fought like every battle was their last, like death was preferable to submission. "Pull back the advance elements," Thexeron ordered. "Reform the line. We need to contain them, wear them down. They cannot sustain this kind of loss." But the humans had no intention of sustaining anything. Admiral Tanaka watched the battle unfold, saw the Council fleet beginning to consolidate, and knew her moment had come. This entire engagement had been planned, every sacrifice calculated. The Council thought they were watching humans die in a futile last stand. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. "Execute Protocol Thermopylae," Tanaka said quietly. Across the Sol system, human ships that had been fighting desperately suddenly disengaged and fled. They scattered in all directions, forcing the Council fleet to either pursue or let them go. The Council commanders, confident in their superior speed, chose to pursue. They wanted to crush the human resistance completely, leave no doubt about the Council's supremacy. That was when the mines activated. Thousands of them, seeded across the system over the past month, hidden among asteroids and chunks of ice. They were simple devices, really. Nuclear warheads with basic proximity sensors, not sophisticated enough to be detected by the Council's advanced scanners, but devastating when they detonated in the middle of a tightly packed fleet. The explosions rippled through the Council formations like fire through dry grass. Ships that had survived for centuries died in an instant, torn apart by nuclear fury. The beautiful, precise formations dissolved into chaos as captains tried to maneuver away from the hidden threats while also tracking the fleeing human vessels. Thexeron's command ship shuddered as a mine detonated nearby, the shockwave sending ripples across his water-filled chamber. "Damage report," he commanded, fighting to maintain his composure. "Minor hull damage. Shields held. But we've lost contact with 17 ships. 32 more are reporting significant damage. Sir, the entire 4th Squadron has been destroyed. 17 ships." The number hit Thexeron like a physical blow. In 1 minute, the humans had destroyed 17 vessels that represented centuries of construction and countless resources. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. "Recall all ships," he ordered. "Pull back to defensive formation. We need to reassess." But the humans weren't done. As the Council fleet tried to reorganize, The human vessels that had been fleeing suddenly reversed course. They came in fast and low, using the cover of the debris field created by the mine explosions. Their railguns fired continuously, targeting the damaged council ships that were limping away from the fight. Admiral Tanaka watched a council battleship, its shields down and its hull cracked open, try to retreat toward the safety of its fleet. A squadron of human frigates intercepted it, pouring fire into the wound until the great ship broke in half. She felt no joy in the kill, only a cold satisfaction that the plan was working. The battle raged for 6 more hours. In the end, the mathematics caught up with humanity. They simply didn't have enough ships to overcome the numerical advantage the Council possessed. One by one, the human vessels were hunted down and destroyed. Some died fighting to the last, their crews manning damaged weapons until the ship broke apart around them. Others managed to escape, jumping to hyperspace and fleeing to the outer colonies. When it was over, Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Defiance, one of only 25 human ships that remained operational. Around Earth, the wrecks of both fleets drifted in the darkness, their hulls torn open and their crews dead or dying. She had started the battle with 73 ships. 48 were gone and thousands of her people with them. But the Council had paid a price too. 89 of their vessels had been destroyed, and dozens more were too damaged to continue fighting. For an empire that hadn't lost a ship in combat in over 300 years, it was a catastrophic loss. Thexeron's face appeared on the view screen, his translucent body darker than before, rippling with what the translator rendered as fury. Admiral Tanaka, you have fought well, but you have lost. Surrender now, and we will be merciful to your people. Tanaka looked at the Krell Admiral, at the alien being who thought mercy was something to be granted from a position of power. She thought about her dead crew members, about the pilots who had rammed their ships into the enemy, about the mine technicians who had spent weeks placing those explosives knowing they might not live to see them used. No, she said. Thexeron's body went still. No, you heard me. No surrender, no mercy. You came to our home, threatened our families, tried to enslave our species. And yes, you won this battle. But winning a battle isn't the same as winning a war. War? The word seemed to confuse the Admiral. You have 25 ships left. We have over 400, even after your traps and your suicide attacks. What war do you think you can fight? Tanaka smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You're about to find out. You see, Admiral, you made a mistake. You thought this was the war. This was just the opening act. We let you come here, let you commit your forces to the Sol system. We needed you to think you'd won, that humanity was beaten. We needed you to feel safe. What are you talking about? Check your communications, Admiral. I think you'll find some interesting messages waiting for you. Thexeron gestured to his communications officer, his body rippling with impatience. A moment later, the officer's response came through. Sir, we're receiving multiple priority alerts from Command. There are reports of attacks across Council space. Shipyards at Teloski 4 have been destroyed. The military depot at Kresh has been sabotaged. The hyperspace relay network is offline in 7 sectors. The Krell Admiral went very still. When did this happen? All within the last hour, sir. While we were engaged here. Tanaka's smile widened. Surprise. You wanted to teach us a lesson about power, Admiral. Let me teach you one about asymmetric warfare. You can't guard everything at once. And while you were here, crushing our fleet in the Sol system, we were everywhere else, hitting targets you thought were safe. Your logistics network, your supply lines, your military infrastructure. We've been planning this for a long time. You're lying, Thexeron said, but his body betrayed his uncertainty, rippling with colors that suggested fear. You couldn't have done this. You're primitives. You've been in space for barely 2 centuries. 2 centuries is a long time when you spend every day of it preparing for war, Tanaka replied. We studied you, Admiral. We studied all of you. Every species on the Council. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your dependencies. We knew this day would come eventually. The Council doesn't tolerate equals, only subjects. So we got ready. This is terrorism, Thexeron snarled. Cowardice. No, Tanaka said quietly. This is war. You started it when you came here with 500 ships and demanded our surrender. Now you're going to see what happens when you pick a fight with a species that has spent its entire history fighting. The transmission ended. Tanaka stood in the silence of her bridge, surrounded by consoles displaying damage reports and casualty lists. They had bought time with blood and fire. Now they would see if it was enough. Commander Rodriguez approached her, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the outer colonies. The fleet elements stationed there are moving into position. Operation Ragnarok is proceeding as planned." Tanaka nodded. Ragnarok. The end of the old world and the beginning of something new. It was a fitting name for what they were about to unleash. The Council thought this was over. They thought humanity would collapse now that Earth's defense fleet was broken. They were so very wrong. The real war was just beginning. The revelation began 40 years before the Council fleet arrived at Earth. It started with a simple question asked by a young intelligence analyst named Marcus Webb, who was reviewing decades-old first contact reports. He sat in a cramped office in Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the 12 elder races of the Council, and asked his supervisor a question that would change the course of human history. Why did they make contact with us? His supervisor, a tired woman named Director Sarah Chen, looked up from her own work. "What do you mean?" "We detected their scout ship. They had no choice but to make contact. But why were they scouting Earth in the first place? We weren't broadcasting anything that would attract attention. No radio signal strong enough to reach beyond our local stellar neighborhood. No nuclear detonations visible from space after we banned atmospheric testing. So why were they looking at us?" The question hung in the air. Director Chen stared at Webb for a long moment, then slowly closed the file she had been working on. "That's a very good question." It took 3 years of investigation to find the answer, buried in classified reports and carefully worded diplomatic documents. The Council hadn't discovered humanity by accident. They had been monitoring Earth for centuries, watching human civilization develop, waiting for the moment when humanity would reach for the stars. They made first contact not because they had to, but because humanity was about to become a problem. The data painted a disturbing picture. Every species the Council had integrated into their empire had been contacted at a crucial moment in their development. Always just as they achieved faster than light travel. Always when they were most vulnerable, most likely to accept the Council's guidance and protection. Always before they could become a threat. Director Chen brought her findings to the United Earth Congress in a closed session that lasted for 12 hours. When she finished presenting the evidence, the chamber sat in stunned silence. Finally, the Secretary General spoke. "They've been planning this from the beginning. First contact wasn't a greeting. It was a containment operation." "Yes," Chen confirmed. "Every species in the Council was absorbed this way. Contacted early, guided into dependency, never allowed to develop their full potential. The Council maintains power not through conquest but through strategic intervention. They make sure no one ever grows strong enough to challenge them." "So what do we do?" Chen looked around the chamber at the faces of Earth's leaders. "We prepare. They'll come for us eventually, once they realize we're not going to submit quietly. When that happens, we need to be ready, not just to fight, but to win." That meeting led to the creation of Project Heimdall, Project Fenrir, and Project Valkyrie. 3 programs so secret that most of Earth's military didn't know they existed. Each one designed to give humanity a chance when the inevitable confrontation came. Project Heimdall was the simplest. Over the course of 4 decades, human freighters and colony ships carried special cargo in their holds. Small, sophisticated missiles that would drift in the void, powered down and invisible to standard sensors. Thousands of them, positioned across Council space waiting for the signal to activate. The Council's own merchant traffic unwittingly helped, never knowing that human cargo containers left at various stations contained more than trade goods. Commander Lisa Park oversaw the final deployment phase of Heimdall. She stood on the bridge of a civilian freighter, watching as her crew carefully ejected another pod into the void near a Council military depot. The pod's engines were cold, its systems dormant. It would drift for years if necessary, just another piece of space debris in a galaxy full of junk. "That's the last one in this sector," her XO reported. 347 units deployed, all sleeping quietly. "Good," Park said. "Let's hope we never have to wake them up." But she knew they would. It was only a matter of time. Project Fenrir was more complex and infinitely more controversial. A team of geneticists, xenobiologists, and weapons designers worked in secret facilities on Mars and Europa, studying samples of the 12 elder races. They mapped genetic sequences, analyzed biological vulnerabilities, and designed weapons that would exploit the unique weaknesses of each species. Dr. James Okonkwo, brother of future Special Forces Commander Sarah Okonkwo, led the Biological Warfare Division. He hated his job. Every day he came to work, he was reminded that he was designing weapons meant to kill sentient beings in the most efficient ways possible. Sonic frequencies that would liquefy Zetherian neural tissue, electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt the collective consciousness of the Krell, thermal weapons that would burn through the methane atmosphere of Vosh, environmental suits. This is genocide, he told Director Chen during one of her inspection visits. If we use these weapons, we'll be no better than the worst monsters in human history. Chen looked at the test results displayed on his terminal, her face impassive. If we use these weapons, it will be because the Council is trying to enslave or exterminate us. Every species has the right to self-defense, James, even if the methods are ugly. Self-defense doesn't justify war crimes. No, Chen agreed, but maybe it justifies making sure that if war comes, we can end it quickly. The longer a war lasts, the more people die on both sides. If these weapons can shorten the conflict, save lives in the long run, isn't that worth the moral weight? Okonkwo had no answer for that. He went back to his work, designing weapons he prayed would never be used, knowing in his heart that they would be. Project Valkyrie was the darkest of the three programs. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, in facilities built into ancient ice and rock, humanity constructed ships that had only one purpose. If Earth fell, if humanity was truly facing extinction, these ships would carry out a final act of vengeance. They were colony killers, each one loaded with enough weaponry to sterilize a planet. They would jump to Council worlds and burn them clean of life, ensuring that if humanity died, they wouldn't die alone. Admiral James Hawking oversaw the construction of the Valkyrie fleet. He was 80 years old, a veteran of Earth's last major conflict, and he understood the terrible necessity of what they were building. The ships were beautiful in a cold, terrible way, sleek and dark, designed to be nearly invisible until they were ready to strike. "We're building genocide machines," his chief engineer said during an inspection tour. The woman looked haunted, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "If these ships ever launch, billions will die." "Yes," Hawking agreed. "That's exactly what they are. And if the Council pushes us to the brink, if they leave us no choice, then those billions will die knowing that they fell with us." Mutually assured destruction kept the peace during the Cold War. Maybe it will work on a galactic scale too. And if it doesn't? If the Council calls our bluff? Hawking looked out at the construction bay where 10 Valkyrie ships hung in the darkness, their weapons systems being installed by automated drones. Then it wasn't a bluff. "Make sure these ships are ready, Commander, and pray we never have to find out if we're actually willing to use them." All three projects operated in absolute secrecy. The civilian population of Earth and the colonies knew nothing about them. Most of the military didn't know. Even Ambassador Chen Wei, standing before the Council and pleading for recognition, didn't know about the preparations being made in case his mission failed. But some people did know, and they were getting ready. Special Forces teams trained in sabotage and guerrilla warfare. Intelligence operatives embedded themselves in Council society, gathering information and making contacts with species that chafed under Council rule. Sleeper agents took jobs in Council facilities, waiting for the day they would be activated. Commander Sarah Okonkwo was one of those Special Forces operators. While her brother designed biological weapons on Mars, she trained with her team in the mountains of New Zealand, learning to survive and fight in any environment. They practiced infiltration, demolition, assassination. They learned the languages and customs of all 12 Council races. They became ghosts, ready to haunt the empire that threatened their home. "You understand what we're asking of you," General Martinez told her team during their final briefing. "When you deploy, there will be no support, no extraction, no rescue if things go wrong. You'll be behind enemy lines, operating alone. Many of you won't come home." Sarah looked at the faces of her team, 50 men and women, all volunteers, all aware of what they were signing up for. They had trained together for 3 years, becoming closer than family. She knew that most of them would die in the coming war. She knew she would probably die with them. "We understand, sir," she said. "We're ready." The pieces moved into position slowly, carefully over the course of 4 decades. The Council noticed some of humanity's military buildup, of course. You couldn't construct 73 warships without someone paying attention, but they saw only what they expected to see. A young species building a modest defense fleet, probably thinking it would protect them when the Council came calling. They never imagined the hidden depths beneath that surface. When the council finally made their demands and humanity refused, the trap was already set. As the council fleet jumped toward the Sol system, human special forces teams across the galaxy received their activation codes. Sarah Okonkwo was on a council mining station in the Telos system, working as a maintenance technician. She had been there for 2 years, learning the station's systems, identifying weak points, building relationships with other workers. The activation message appeared on her personal communicator, a simple text that looked like a message from home. Uncle Marcus says hello. See you at the reunion. Sarah deleted the message and checked her chronometer. She had 6 hours before the operation began. 6 hours to prepare, to make her peace with what she was about to do, to say goodbye to the person she used to be. That night she met with the 3 other human agents on the station in a maintenance corridor that wasn't monitored. They looked at each other in silence, communicating without words. They all knew the job. They all knew the cost. For Earth, one of them said quietly. For humanity, Sarah replied. They split up, each heading to their assigned target. Sarah made her way to the station's primary power distribution center, carrying a bag that supposedly contained replacement parts. Inside were shaped charges and a detonator. She worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Place the charges, set the timer, get out. Except she couldn't get out. As she was leaving the power center, she ran into a security patrol. A Zetherian guard, his 3 eyes narrowing as he saw her. You're not authorized to be here, he said, his hand moving to his weapon. Sarah's training took over. She moved fast, striking the guard's throat before he could draw. They fought in the narrow corridor, silent and desperate. The Zetherian was stronger, his high-gravity evolution giving him an advantage. But Sarah was faster, and she was fighting for something bigger than herself. When it was over, the guard lay dead at her feet. She stood over him, breathing hard, knowing that her cover was blown. The timer on her charges showed 4 minutes. Not enough time to escape the station before they detonated. She could disable the charges, save herself, try again another day. Or she could complete the mission. Sarah thought about her brother on Mars, designing weapons he hated because humanity needed them. She thought about the thousands of people who had given years of their lives to prepare for this moment. She thought about the children on Earth who deserved to grow up free. She left the charges armed and ran, not toward the escape pods but toward the station's shipyard section. There were other targets there, other systems to sabotage. If she was going to die, she would make it count. The charges detonated exactly on schedule, taking out the power distribution center and cascading through the station systems. Backup power tried to engage but found its systems had also been sabotaged by another human agent. The shipyard's defense grid went offline. The docked council warships in the middle of maintenance cycles were suddenly vulnerable. Sarah reached the shipyard control center and found it abandoned, the council personnel evacuating as alarms shrieked through the station. She sat down at a terminal and began entering commands, using access codes she had stolen weeks ago. The warship's automated defense systems came online, but she reprogrammed their targeting computers. They saw each other as threats. The warships opened fire on each other, their weapons tearing through hulls that weren't protected by active shields. Explosions rippled through the shipyard as fusion reactors went critical. Sarah watched the destruction she had unleashed, felt the station shuddering around her and smiled. She died 30 seconds later when the ceiling collapsed, but by then, she had already won. The first reports reached the Galactic Council chambers while Chancellor Vormakis was celebrating humanity's defeat in the Sol system. He sat in his private office drinking a ceremonial blend of fermented grains, watching recordings of the battle. The humans had fought well, he admitted to himself. Better than expected. But they had still lost, as they always would have. The Council's dominance was inevitable, written in the mathematics of power. Then his communicator chimed with an emergency code he hadn't heard in 300 years. The last time it had been used was during the Kresh Rebellion, when a subjugated species tried to overthrow their council-appointed governors. That rebellion had lasted 6 days before being crushed. Chancellor, his aide's voice was tight with stress. We have a situation. Multiple situations. You need to come to the command center immediately. Vormakis set down his drink and made his way through the station. Other council members were emerging from their quarters, all summoned by the same urgent calls. They gathered in the command center, A vast room filled with holographic displays showing the entire council-controlled galaxy. Red warning indicators were appearing across the display like a spreading infection. Formaki stared at them, his 3 eyes wide with disbelief. "Report," he commanded. The officer on duty, a young Vosh whose environmental suit was misting with anxiety, began listing the incidents. "The military shipyard at Telos 4 has been destroyed. Sabotage," confirmed human agents. "The hyperspace relay network in 7 sectors has been taken offline, methods unknown. But preliminary evidence suggests human involvement. The supply depot at Crash Station has been destroyed. The research facility at Gamma Centauri has been compromised." The list continues, Chancellor. "We have reports of attacks on over 40 installations across Council space." 40? Formakis felt his blood chill. "That's impossible. The humans couldn't have infiltrated that many facilities. We monitor all movement through Council space. We would have detected any military deployment." "These don't appear to be military forces, sir. Initial reports suggest small teams, possibly individuals. They've been in place for years. Some of them worked at these facilities." The implications hit Formakis like a physical blow. Years. The humans had been planning this for years, putting their people in position, waiting for this moment. While the Council debated what to do about humanity's expansion, while they drafted ultimatums and assembled fleets, the humans had been preparing for war. "What are our losses?" he asked quietly. The Vosh officer consulted her displays. "Still compiling data, sir, but preliminary estimates suggest over 300 vessels destroyed or disabled. Shipyard capacity reduced by approximately 40%. Hyperspace communications disrupted across 1/3 of Council space. Strategic material reserves at Crash were significant, enough to support our fleets for 2 years. All of it destroyed. 300 vessels." Formakis sat down heavily, his massive frame settling into the command chair. In the Sol system, humanity had destroyed 89 ships. That had seemed like a catastrophic loss. Now he was learning they had somehow taken out 300 more across Council space, in a single coordinated strike. "How long until we can restore the hyperspace relays?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. The damage is extensive. Whoever did this knew exactly where to hit. We're looking at weeks, possibly months to repair. And in the meantime, our fleets can't coordinate. Each sector is on its own." Formakis felt a headache building behind his eyes. "What about the Heimdall missiles?" There was a pause. "Sir?" Intelligence intercepts mentioned something called Project Heimdall. Missiles, thousands of them. "Have we found them?" The officer worked her displays, pulling up intelligence reports. "Sir, we've detected no unusual missile deployments. Our deep space sensor networks would have picked up any large-scale weapons positioning. Unless they're stealthed. Unless they've been out there for years. Powered down, waiting." Formakis stood and approached the holographic display. "Run a full sensor sweep. Every system. Look for any anomalies, anything that could be a dormant weapons platform." The sensor sweeps took 12 hours. When the results came back, Formakis felt his certainty crumble. They found over 2,000 objects that could potentially be dormant missiles. Small, cold, nearly invisible against the background radiation of space. They had been there all along, drifting silently while Council ships passed them by. "Can we destroy them?" Formakis asked. "Some of them, sir. But they're spread across hundreds of light years. It would take months to hunt them all down. And any attempt to approach them might trigger their activation. We don't know what their programming is. So we're living with thousands of swords hanging over our heads." Formakis turned to the assembled Council members. "The humans have turned our own space into a minefield. They can strike anywhere at any time, and we can't stop them without knowing which of those objects are actually weapons." "This is terrorism," said Councillor Rethkan, his serpentine body coiled tight with anger. "They've violated every convention of warfare, targeting civilian installations, using sabotage, placing weapons throughout neutral space. The humans must be made to answer for these crimes." "With what forces?" Formakis asked bitterly. "We sent 500 ships to Sol. Over 400 are damaged or destroyed. The humans fought us to a standstill with 73 vessels and a bunch of suicide tactics. Our other fleets are scattered across the galaxy, trying to maintain order in the sectors where communications are still working. If we pull them back to strike Earth again, we leave those sectors undefended, and the humans have already demonstrated they can hit us anywhere. So what do you suggest? Surrender?" Councillor Shell's environmental suit hissed with indignation. "Allow these primitives to dictate terms to us? I suggest we think very carefully about our next move, Vormakis said. Because the humans have shown us something important. They're not primitives. They're dangerous, and they've been planning for this war longer than we realized. As the Council argued, humanity was already launching the next phase of Operation Ragnarok. Admiral Tanaka's surviving ships had withdrawn from Earth orbit, but they hadn't fled to safety. They had rendezvoused with the hidden fleet elements that had been stationed throughout human colonial space. Ships that the Council had never known existed, built in secret facilities on dozens of worlds. The human fleet now numbered over 200 vessels, not enough to match the Council's full military might, but enough to be a serious threat. And unlike the Council's forces, humanity's fleet was concentrated, ready to strike wherever they chose. Tanaka stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UES Retribution. Around her, holographic displays showed the strategic situation. Council space was in chaos, their communications network crippled, their logistics breaking down. It was time to twist the knife. Target selection? She asked her tactical officer. We have 3 primary options, Admiral. The shipyards at Viridian, the Council government complex at Centris Prime, or the military academy at Threshold. All are lightly defended right now. The bulk of Council forces are still scattered from the Sol engagement. Tanaka studied the options. Hitting the shipyards would damage the Council's ability to rebuild their fleet. Hitting the government complex would be a symbolic strike, showing that nowhere was safe. Hitting the academy would cripple their ability to train future officers. None of those, she said. We're not here to destroy the Council. We're here to break their hold on the galaxy, target the prison worlds, the labor camps where they keep the species who tried to rebel. We're going to set them free. The raids began within days. Human strike forces jumped into systems where the Council kept their political prisoners and forced laborers. Species who had dared to challenge Council authority and paid the price. The attacks were swift and brutal. Human ships hit the orbital defenses hard, destroying them before they could call for help. Then troop transports landed and human soldiers stormed the facilities. Captain Maria Santos led the assault on a prison complex on Dracon III. Her team moved through the corridors, stunning guards and releasing prisoners. Most of the inmates were from species she had never seen before, aliens who looked at the human soldiers with confusion and hope. "Who are you?" one of them asked, speaking through a translator. She was a Threx, her forearms shackled to the wall, her fur matted with dirt and blood. "We're humans," Santos said, breaking the electronic locks. "And we're here to start a revolution." The freed prisoners were given a choice. They could take transport to neutral worlds, or they could join the fight against the Council. Most chose to fight. They had scores to settle, grievances built up over decades or centuries of oppression. The humans gave them weapons, taught them basic tactics, and pointed them at Council installations. Within weeks, rebellions were erupting across Council space. The Threx rose up on their homeworld, overwhelming the Council garrison through sheer numbers. The Kelvin, who had been conquered 5,000 years ago, sabotaged the Council's mining operations on their world. The Zaraki, forced into labor camps for 3 generations, seized a Council naval base and turned its weapons on their former masters. Chancellor Vormakis watched his empire crumble on the holographic displays. Everywhere he looked, species were in revolt. The Council's carefully maintained order, built over 50,000 years, was falling apart in a matter of weeks. "We need to respond," Councillor Rethcon insisted. "Send our fleets to crush these rebellions. Make examples of the leaders. Show the galaxy what happens when you defy the Council." "With what fleets?" Vormakis asked. "We have maybe 2,000 operational warships left. That sounds like a lot until you realize we need to cover 10,000 star systems. If we concentrate our forces to crush one rebellion, 10 more will spring up in the sectors we leave undefended. The humans have created a situation where we cannot win." "Then we negotiate," said Ambassador Thex. "Open communications with the humans. Find out what they want. There must be some way to end this without destroying everything we've built." Vormakis looked at the Krell ambassador. "And what makes you think they'll negotiate?" "We tried to enslave them. We killed thousands of their people. Why would they accept anything less than our complete destruction?" "Because humans understand mercy," Thex said. "Their history shows it. They fought terrible wars among themselves, but they always left room for reconciliation afterward. They rebuilt their enemies, helped them recover. It's one of their strange quirks. They're capable of terrible violence, but also remarkable compassion. If we approach them correctly, they might be willing to discuss terms. It was a slim hope, but it was the only hope Vormakis had left. He authorized the transmission, a direct communication to the human fleet. He expected to speak with Admiral Tanaka, or perhaps some human political leader. Instead, Ambassador Chen Wei appeared on the view screen, the same human who had stood before the council months ago, pleading for recognition. He looked older now, his face lined with stress and grief, but his eyes were hard, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of all humanity behind it. Chancellor Vormakis, I'm told you want to discuss terms. Yes, Vormakis said. This war has gone on long enough. Surely we can find some way to end it that doesn't require the destruction of everything we've built. You're right, Chen said. This war has gone on long enough. It's gone on for 50,000 years, with the Council crushing every species that dared to dream of freedom. It ends now. What are your demands? Chen smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had finally gotten what he wanted. I'm not here to make demands, Chancellor. I'm here to dictate terms. You don't have a choice anymore. Your empire is falling apart. Your fleets are scattered. Your logistics are destroyed. And every day more species join our cause. You will accept our terms, or you will watch everything you've built burn to ashes. And what are these terms? The Galactic Council is dissolved, effective immediately. All subjugated species are granted full independence. Council military forces will disarm and submit to inspection by an independent oversight committee. War crimes trials will be held for Council members and military officers who authorized atrocities against conquered species. And most importantly, a new galactic government will be formed, one based on equality and democratic representation. Every species gets a voice. Every world gets a vote. No more emperors. No more overlords. Vormakis listened to the terms with growing horror. Chen wasn't just demanding surrender. He was demanding the end of everything the Council stood for. The destruction of 50,000 years of civilization and order. You're asking us to commit suicide, Vormakis said quietly. No, Chen replied. We're asking you to evolve, to become something better than what you are. The Council maintained peace, true, but it was the peace of tyrants. You kept order by crushing anyone who threatened your authority. That's not civilization, Chancellor. That's just a more sophisticated form of barbarism. And you think your democracy will work better? That rabble of freed slaves and rebellious colonists will somehow create something more stable than what we built? Maybe, Chen admitted. Maybe not. But at least they'll have the chance to try. At least they'll be free to make their own mistakes instead of living under yours. The transmission ended. Vormakis sat in silence, staring at the empty screen. Around him, the other council members argued and shouted, but their voices seemed distant. He thought about his species' history, about the thousands of years they had spent building the council, maintaining the peace, guiding younger races. Had it all been a lie? Had they been tyrants all along, blind to their own cruelty? He didn't know. But he knew one thing with certainty. The humans had won, not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through pure stubborn refusal to submit. They had turned the galaxy against the Council, exposed the Empire's weaknesses, and offered an alternative that people were desperate enough to believe in. The age of the Council was over. Something new was beginning, and Vormakis had no idea if it would be better or worse than what came before. 3 months after the retaliation began, Ambassador Chen Wei walked through the damaged corridors of the Galactic Council station. The walls still bore scorch marks from the battle that had raged here 2 weeks ago, when Threk's rebels stormed the facility and forced the remaining council members to evacuate to the central chambers. Now those same rebels stood guard at the doorways, their forearms holding weapons they barely knew how to use, but holding them with the determination of people who would never be enslaved again. Chen was flanked by Admiral Tanaka on his left and Commander Marcus Rodriguez on his right. Behind them walked representatives from 17 different species, all of them freed from council control in the past months. They made an odd procession through the halls where the council had once ruled with absolute authority. Now those halls belonged to everyone, and the old order was waiting inside to face judgment. The council chamber had been modified. The floating platforms where the 12 elder races once sat in judgment were gone, torn down by angry crowds in the first days after the surrender. Now there was a simple semicircle of chairs on the diamond floor, and in those chairs sat what remained of the council leadership. Chancellor Vormakis, Admiral Thexeron, and 8 others. 4 council members had fled when the end became inevitable. disappearing into the outer reaches of the galaxy. 2 had died, one in the fighting and one by his own hand rather than face what was coming. Chen took his place at a podium that had been set up in the center of the chamber. He looked at the council members, seeing how much they had changed in just a few months. Formakis looked older, the bone ridge on his skull seeming heavier somehow. Thex's translucent body had lost its vibrant colors, now showing only pale blues and grays. The others looked similarly defeated, their arrogance stripped away, leaving only tired beings who knew their time was over. "The provisional government has sent me to deliver the formal terms of surrender," Chen began, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Before I do, I want to say something personal." He paused, choosing his words carefully. 3 months ago, I stood in this chamber and begged for recognition. I pleaded with you to see humanity as equals, to grant us the sovereignty we had earned. You refused. You threatened my people with enslavement, with extinction if we didn't submit to your authority. And in doing so, you forced us to show you what humans are capable of when pushed to the edge. Formakis met Chen's gaze. "You proved your point, Ambassador. Humanity is dangerous. We underestimated you. We paid for that mistake." "You didn't just underestimate us," Chen said. "You underestimated everyone. Every species you conquered, every rebellion you crushed, every world you subjugated. You thought your power made you right. You thought because you had maintained order for 50,000 years, that gave you the authority to rule forever. But power doesn't grant wisdom, Chancellor. It just makes you comfortable. So now you'll replace us," Thex said, his body rippling with resignation. "The humans will become the new council, ruling in our place. The cycle continues, just with different masters." "No," Chen said firmly. "That's not what's happening here. We're not here to replace you. We're here to end the system that allowed you to exist in the first place." He activated a holographic display, showing the document that had been drafted over the past months. Representatives from hundreds of species had contributed to it, arguing and debating every word. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, created by the people it would govern rather than imposed from above. "The Galactic Council is officially dissolved," Chen read from the document. "In its place, we establish the Galactic Assembly. Every spacefaring species, regardless of size or power, receives equal representation. Decisions are made by majority vote, with protections for minority rights. No single species or coalition can hold permanent power. Leaders are elected for fixed terms and can be removed if they abuse their authority." "Chaos," Formakis said quietly. "That's what you're describing. Democracy on a galactic scale will be chaos, species with no understanding of governance making decisions that affect billions, mobs swayed by emotion rather than wisdom. You're trading stable tyranny for unstable freedom." "Maybe," Chen admitted. "Democracy is messy. It's slow. It makes mistakes. But those mistakes belong to the people making them, not imposed by rulers who think they know better. And yes, there will be chaos at first. Species learning to work together, figuring out how to compromise and cooperate. But that's part of the process. That's how you build something that lasts, not through force but through consent." "And what of us?" asked Councillor Schall, her environmental suit hissing softly. "What happens to the council members? To our species? Will you execute us as war criminals? Exile us to some forgotten world?" Chen looked at the assembled council members. He thought about all the suffering they had caused, all the species crushed under their rule. He thought about Sarah Okonkwo, who died bringing down a shipyard. About the thousands of human soldiers and spacers who never came home. About the millions across the galaxy who had lived and died as slaves to the Council's order. "There will be trials," he said. "Individuals who ordered atrocities, who committed war crimes, will face justice. But we're not interested in collective punishment. Your species aren't responsible for the crimes of their leaders. Most of you were just following orders, maintaining a system you were born into. That doesn't excuse what was done, but it does mean we can move forward without destroying entire civilizations." "How very generous," Formakis said, and there was no mistaking the bitterness in his voice. "It's not generosity," Chen replied. "It's pragmatism. If we start this new government by committing genocide against the old ruling species, we'd be no better than you were. The whole point of this revolution is to break the cycle, not continue it with different victims." Admiral Tanaka stepped forward, her uniform still bearing the insignia of the United Earth Space Command. "I want to address something," she said. "During the war, We used weapons that were specifically designed to kill Council species in efficient ways. Biological weapons, sonic weapons, tools of mass destruction. We deployed them because we were fighting for survival. But now that the war is over, those weapons are being destroyed. She pulled up another display showing footage of human ships methodically destroying the Project Fenrir weapons stockpiles, containers of biological agents being jettisoned into stars, sonic weapons being dismantled, the hidden Valkyrie fleet, those planet-killing ships that had waited in the dark being decommissioned and converted into colony vessels. We built these weapons because we were afraid, Tanaka continued. Afraid you would enslave us, exterminate us. Now that fear is over. We don't need weapons of genocide anymore. We don't want them. The future we're building has no place for that kind of horror. Thex's body rippled with confusion. You're destroying your own weapons? While you're still in a position of power? That makes no strategic sense. You could use those weapons to ensure compliance, to threaten anyone who opposes the new order. That's exactly why we're destroying them, Tanaka said. Power corrupts. We've seen it with the Council. We've seen it in our own history. The only way to prevent the new government from becoming like the old one is to remove the tools of oppression. Yes, that makes us vulnerable. Yes, that means we can't force compliance through fear. But that's the point. If the Galactic Assembly is going to work, it has to work through cooperation, not coercion. Vormakis laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. You're fools. Noble fools, but fools nonetheless. You've given up your advantage, destroyed your leverage. Within a generation, some ambitious species will realize what you've done and build their own weapons. They'll dominate the Assembly just like the Council dominated the galaxy, and you'll have no way to stop them, because you threw away your power for the sake of principles. Maybe, Chen said, but maybe not. Maybe by showing that it's possible to hold power and choose to relinquish it, we'll inspire others to do the same. Maybe by building institutions based on cooperation instead of domination, we'll create something more stable than what the Council ever achieved. It's a risk, but it's a risk worth taking. The formal surrender took another 2 hours. Council assets were transferred to the provisional government. Military forces were ordered to stand down and submit to inspection. The locations of hidden facilities and weapons caches were revealed. Vormakis signed the documents with a hand that shook slightly, and when he finished, he looked at Chen with an expression the ambassador couldn't quite read. I have a question, the former chancellor said. When you stood before us 3 months ago, did you know this would happen? Did you already have your plans in place? Chen considered the question carefully. We had contingencies. We hoped it wouldn't come to war, but we prepared for it anyway. Does that make us manipulative? Maybe. But we learned a long time ago that hope is not a strategy. You have to prepare for the worst while working toward the best. And what did you learn from us? Vormakis asked. You studied the Council for decades, preparing for this confrontation. What was the most important lesson? Chen smiled sadly. We learned that power without accountability always becomes tyranny eventually. It doesn't matter how benevolent you start out, how good your intentions are. If there's no way to check your authority, no mechanism to remove you if you abuse it, you'll eventually become the villain in someone else's story. The Council lasted 50,000 years, but it was built on a foundation of force. That could never last forever. 50,000 years seems like forever to me, Vormakis said quietly. Maybe for individuals, but civilizations measure time differently. 50,000 years of peace built on subjugation isn't as impressive as 50 years of peace built on consent. Quality matters more than quantity. The Council members were escorted from the chamber by guards from a dozen different species. They would be held in comfortable confinement while the trials were organized. Some of them would likely face execution for their crimes. Others might be allowed to return to their homeworlds, to live out their lives as private citizens of the new order. But either way, their time as rulers was over. Chen stood in the empty chamber after they left, looking around at the space that had witnessed so much suffering and injustice. Admiral Tanaka joined him, her hands clasped behind her back. It's really over, she said quietly. I keep expecting to wake up and find out this was all a dream. That we're still fighting a losing battle against an empire we couldn't defeat. We did defeat them, Chen said, but not the way they expected. Not through superior firepower or technology. We won by refusing to accept their authority, by showing other species that resistance was possible, by building an alternative that people wanted more than they wanted security. And now comes the hard part, Rodriguez said, joining them. Actually making this new government work. Fighting a war is simple compared to building a peace. We're going to have hundreds of species arguing about everything, conflicts that we have no idea how to resolve, problems we can't even imagine yet. Good, Chen said. That means we're doing it right. If it was easy, it would mean we were still following someone's plan, still accepting someone else's order. Democracy is supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be frustrating. That's how you know it's real. They left the chamber together, walking through corridors that were being repaired by workers from a dozen worlds. Everywhere Chen looked, he saw species working side by side, some of them former enemies learning to cooperate. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still conflicts, but it was genuine, and that made it worth the struggle. 6 months after the surrender, the first session of the Galactic Assembly convened. Representatives from 347 species gathered in a new facility built on a neutral world, one that had never been part of any empire. The debates were chaotic, as Rodriguez had predicted. Species argued over resources, territory, trade agreements, security protocols. The sessions ran long, with multiple votes needed to reach consensus on even simple matters, but they were there. They were participating, and slowly, painfully, they were learning to work together. Chen attended as Earth's representative, though he knew he wouldn't hold the position forever. Elections were scheduled for the following year, and he had already decided not to run. Let someone else carry the burden. He had done his part, pushing humanity to stand up to the Council, guiding them through the war and its aftermath. Now it was time for others to take over, to bring fresh perspectives and new ideas. On the final day of the first session, a young Threx approached him in the corridor outside the assembly hall. She was barely an adult, her fur still showing the bright colors of youth. She held a datapad nervously in her upper arms. Ambassador Chen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask you something. Of course, Chen said, smiling. What can I help you with? In your speech to the Council before the war, you said that humanity deserved recognition because you had earned it. But after the war, you said that the new government would be based on equality, with everyone having the same voice regardless of their achievements. How do you reconcile those two positions? If everyone is equal, what's the point of earning anything? Chen considered the question, seeing the genuine curiosity in her eyes. That's a good question. The answer is that there are different kinds of equality. We asked for recognition of our achievements because the Council was denying us basic rights based on our age as a civilization. That was wrong. But being equal in rights doesn't mean being equal in accomplishments. Your species, your people, you all have different strengths and weaknesses.
The assembly isn't about pretending everyone is the same.
It's about ensuring everyone has the same opportunity to contribute, the same voice in decisions that affect them. So humans aren't special? The young Threx asked. Even though you led the revolution, even though you destroyed the Council, you don't get special treatment? Especially because we did those things, Chen said. The moment we accept special treatment is the moment we start down the same path as the Council. Power corrupts, remember? The only way to prevent that is to hold ourselves to the same standards as everyone else. We're not special. We're just the species that happen to be in the right place at the right time to start the change. But the change belongs to everyone now. The young Threx nodded thoughtfully, making notes on her datapad. I'm writing a history paper about the revolution. Can I quote you? Of course, Chen said. Just make sure you include the context. History is complicated. There are no simple heroes or villains, just people making choices and living with the consequences. She thanked him and hurried off, already composing her paper. Chen watched her go, thinking about how different her life would be from her parents' generation. She would grow up free, never knowing the fear of Council enforcers or the weight of chains. That was worth everything they had sacrificed. Admiral Tanaka found him a few minutes later, holding 2 glasses of something that might have been wine. The Vosh delegation wants to toast the new age of cooperation, she said, handing him a glass. They're getting drunk on fermented methane and inviting everyone to join them. Chen laughed, accepting the glass. Somehow I don't think human biology is compatible with fermented methane. Probably not. But it's the thought that counts, she raised her glass. To the future, however messy it turns out to be. To the future, Chen agreed, clinking his glass against hers. They stood at a viewport looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the last remnants of the Council's military were surrendering to local defense forces. Somewhere out there, Former slaves were building new civilizations on worlds that had been prison colonies for generations. Somewhere out there, species that had never met were making first contact, learning about each other without the Council's interference. The galaxy was changing. It would take time, decades or centuries before the new order truly stabilized. There would be conflicts, maybe even wars. Some species would thrive while others struggled. The path forward was uncertain, dangerous, full of risks. But it was theirs. Chosen freely, built collectively, owned by everyone who participated rather than imposed by rulers who claimed to know better. Chen looked at the stars and smiled. Humanity had come a long way from that moment when council ships first arrived at Earth, offering guidance that was really servitude. They had fought for their freedom, won it through blood and sacrifice, and then chosen to share it rather than hoard it. That, more than the battles or the weapons or the clever tactics, was what made humanity special. Not their ability to destroy, but their choice to build. Not their capacity for violence, but their commitment to something better. A chime sounded from Chen's communicator. He checked it and saw a message from Earth. The United Earth Congress wanted his input on the memorial they were building for those who died in the war. They were debating whether to include the names of enemy combatants alongside human casualties. They want to honor the Council soldiers, Chen said, showing Tanaka the message. The ones who were just following orders. Some Congress members think it's a betrayal of our own dead. Others think it's necessary for reconciliation. Tanaka was quiet for a moment, staring at her glass. I killed a lot of them, gave orders that sent thousands to their deaths. Some of them probably had families, children waiting for them to come home. They never made it because of decisions I made. You were protecting humanity, Chen said gently. I know, and I'd make the same choices again if I had to. But that doesn't mean I can't acknowledge what it cost them. War isn't clean, Chen. There are no purely good outcomes. We won, humanity is free, and the galaxy is better for it. But people died to make that happen. People on both sides who deserved better than to become casualties in someone else's political struggle. Chen looked at the message again, then typed a response. Include them. All of them. We don't have to celebrate what they fought for, but we can acknowledge that they were living beings who died far from home. If we're building a new kind of civilization, it starts with recognizing the humanity in everyone, even our enemies. He sent the message and pocketed the communicator. Tanaka nodded approvingly. You know what the strangest part is? She said. Before the war, I spent every day preparing for it, running drills, studying tactics, building contingencies. I was terrified we'd lose, that humanity would be enslaved or wiped out. Now that it's over, I miss the simplicity. Back then, the enemy was clear. The mission was obvious, now everything is complicated. Welcome to peace, Chen said with a wry smile. It's harder than war because there's no clear victory condition. Just the daily work of trying to make things a little better than they were yesterday. A group of delegates walked past, arguing loudly in 3 different languages about mining rights in some disputed system. Their voices echoed through the corridor, mixing with the hum of life support systems and the distant sound of construction equipment repairing battle damage. Do you think it will work? Tanaka asked. Really work, I mean. Or will we just end up creating a different kind of empire, one with better marketing? Chen thought about all the species he had met in the past months. The Threks learning to govern themselves after 5,000 years of servitude. The Kelvin rebuilding their culture from fragments preserved in secret. The Zaraki teaching their children about freedom for the first time in living memory. He thought about the arguments in the assembly, the compromises being hammered out, the slow, painful process of learning to trust each other. I think we have a chance, he said finally. Not a guarantee, but a chance. We've dismantled the mechanisms of control, destroyed the weapons of oppression, and built something that requires constant participation instead of passive obedience. It's not perfect. It will never be perfect. But it's real, and that makes it worth protecting. That's all we ever had, Tanaka said. A chance. We took it when we refused the Council's ultimatum. We took it when we fought a war we couldn't win through conventional means. And we're taking it now, building something new from the ashes of the old order. Maybe that's what being human is really about, taking chances when the safe option is to submit. They finished their drinks in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly past the viewport. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new crises, new problems that needed solving. But tonight, they could stand together and appreciate what they had accomplished. The galaxy would never be the same. 50,000 years of council rule had ended not with a whimper but with a thunderous declaration that no species had the right to rule over others. Humanity had sent shockwaves through the halls of the Galactic Council, and those shockwaves had shattered an empire. What rose from the ruins was still taking shape, still fragile, still uncertain, but it was free. And for the first time in 50 millennia, the galaxy had a chance to determine its own destiny. Chen raised his empty glass toward the stars one final time, a private salute to all those who had made this moment possible. To Sarah Okonkwo, who died bringing down a shipyard, to the thousands of soldiers and spacers who never came home, to the rebels and revolutionaries across hundreds of worlds, to every being who chose freedom over security, who risked everything for the chance at something better. The Council had thought humanity was a problem to be solved. They had been right, just not in the way they imagined. Humanity was the problem that broke their perfect system, the variable that refused to fit into their equations of control. And in breaking that system, humanity had given the galaxy a gift more valuable than peace through tyranny. They had given it hope. As Chen and Tanaka walked back toward the assembly chambers, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, a new day was dawning across the galaxy. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but genuinely free. And that made all the difference.